St. Francis was born in Assisi in 1180, and he died in 1226 at the age of 44. You all know the story of St. Francis of Assisi. He was from a very wealthy family, and he had all the good things that the world could offer. But he was so touched as he read the gospel and wanted so much to conform himself and to follow the gospel literally. And so he took Jesus' words to heart. Go and sell all that you have and give it to the poor, and then come and follow me. And literally he did that. His father was totally angered. He took off all of his clothes and brought all of his possessions and laid them in a pile in front of his father and said that I don't want these things anymore. They don't delight me anymore. The only delight that I have is being close to Jesus Christ. And so he put on just his brown habit, and Francis began to listen to the word of God and tried to imitate it in his day-to-day life. The little chapel at San Damiano was in a field, and it was all falling apart. And Francis went there, and from the cross, he heard Jesus say, rebuild my church. And Francis thought literally that's what he wanted him to do, was to rebuild that church. So he started, got bricks and stone and literally rebuilt that little chapel. Right now in Assisi, that chapel is right in the center of the big basilica of St. Francis that's there in the town of Assisi. And it stands as a monument of his humility and poverty. He, from his poverty, could just go out and find all the stone and all the things he needed to rebuild the church. But he did more than that, rebuild the church building. He touched many hearts and many lives, and many people began to follow Francis and trying to imitate the same values that he had of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and complete and total commitment to God as religious people. And many followed him. As you know, the Franciscan order is huge in the world today. I was thinking about my fish because he preached to the fish. There's pictures of the fish coming up to the water and opening, closing their mouths, and Francis talking to them. And so today I asked God to bless my fish through the intercession of St. Francis. And I think he will. I really think he will. As I told you a couple of weeks ago, they were real sick. And I prayed hard to Francis, and they both got better. So I think he loves them probably more than I do. But you see, he loved nature. He loved animals. He saw in them the grandeur and the beauty of God, all of creation, starting with people, thinking of the angels, and then looking at all the created reality and the beauty of the animals. I have a statue of St. Francis with the wolf. You know that story, that he was in the village where he was, or nearby where he lived. There was a wolf that came into the village and was terrorizing the people. Parents were afraid to let their children go outside because they feared that the wolf would attack them. And the wolf was really terrorizing the whole town, and nobody could catch it. They tried. But Francis came in, and he walked right up to it and started talking to him. And all of a sudden, the wolf changed his whole attitude. And Francis told him, you should be guarding this town, not frightening everybody, especially the children. Well, they couldn't believe what they saw. The wolf was walking with Francis around the town, and the children could come out and pet it, and he was guarding the town, literally. No more threat. So I love that statue with him, with the wolf. But those are things that God lets saints do, I think, to remind us that the Lord does watch over us, and the Lord is with us in all ways. And Francis of Assisi is a very simple man. As he said, he was a nothing to himself, but in the eyes of God, Francis was great because of his love for the poor, his love for Christ. So much did he love Christ crucified that the Lord allowed the stigmata to come to St. Francis, the wounds in his hands, his side, and his feet, and they were real wounds that had real pain. Francis had poor health. He suffered from a lot of different health problems, but he always offered it up with the cross and just continued to trust totally on God. So he's a saint that's good for us to imitate in our prayer life, in our own selves, being less attached to material things and more attached to Christ. We can take nothing to heaven with us, no thing we take to heaven. But like a friend of mine said one time, he never saw a U-Haul truck in a funeral procession. And I thought that was a good observation. All that we take to heaven is the life of prayer, the life of good works, and the love that we show to God and others. That's what goes to heaven with us. And that's what Francis wanted and set the example. So we thank the Lord for this great saint and ask God to help us imitate his virtues. Let us stand and offer our prayers and petitions.